The early morning mist clung to the military base like a gray blanket as Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart through the empty corridors of Building 7. Her worn sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floors, the only sound breaking the pre-dawn silence. At 52, Maria had perfected the art of becoming invisible. She arrived at 4 in the morning, finished her work by noon, and left without anyone really noticing she had been there at all. The other cleaning staff called her Ghost Maria behind her back, not out of cruelty, but because she seemed to glide through the halls without disturbing anything or anyone. She never complained about the extra hours, never asked for help with the heavier tasks, and never joined the others for their lunch break gossip sessions in the storage room. Maria had been cleaning the Barrett military installation for 3 years now, ever since she had arrived in the small Texas town with nothing but a duffel bag and a heart full of secrets. The employment agency had been thrilled to place her. Finding reliable cleaning staff for military facilities was always challenging, and Maria had excellent references from her previous job in California, though she never spoke about why she had left. The soldiers who passed her in the hallways saw exactly what she wanted them to see: a middle-aged Hispanic woman with tired eyes and calloused hands, someone who cleaned their toilets and emptied their trash cans. They nodded politely when they encountered her. Some even said good morning, but none of them really looked at her. Not really. This morning was different, though Maria couldn't quite put her finger on why. As she moved through the administrative wing, carefully dusting the photographs of military heroes that lined the walls, she felt a strange electricity in the air. Perhaps it was because today marked exactly 3 years since she had started working here. 3 years of hiding in plain sight. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was one of the few people who actually spoke to Maria beyond basic pleasantries. Fresh out of West Point and assigned to the base's intelligence division, Sarah had grown up in a household where respect for all workers was paramount. Her parents had owned a restaurant in San Francisco's Chinatown, and Sarah had learned early that the people who cleaned, cooked, and maintained the world around you deserved courtesy and recognition. "Good morning, Mrs. Santos," Sarah said as she passed Maria in the hallway, balancing a stack of classified folders and a coffee cup that threatened to spill with each step. "Buenos dias." "Lieutenant Chen," Maria replied, her accent thick but her English clear. She paused in her dusting to step aside, making room for the young officer to pass. Sarah noticed things others missed. She had observed that Maria's hands, while weathered from years of cleaning work, moved with a precision that seemed almost surgical when she handled delicate equipment or organized papers. There was something about the way Maria carried herself, too. A straightness to her spine that spoke of discipline, of training that went beyond learning how to properly mop a floor. But Sarah kept these observations to herself. In the military, you learned when to ask questions and when to simply file information away for later consideration. Maria continued her routine, moving methodically through each room. She had mapped out the most efficient route through the building, timing her movements to avoid the busiest periods when officers rushed between meetings and briefings. In Conference Room B, she carefully wiped down the long table where colonels and majors made decisions about operations she wasn't supposed to understand. As she cleaned, Maria's eyes automatically cataloged everything: the documents left carelessly on desks, the conversations that drifted through thin walls, the schedules posted on whiteboards. Old habits died hard, and 3 decades of training couldn't be erased simply because she now held a mop instead of a mission briefing. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, cleaning the very type of facility where she had once held the highest security clearances, where she had made decisions that affected national security operations around the world. The woman who now emptied trash bins had once sat in rooms just like these, planning missions that would never appear in any public record. Around 10 o'clock, Maria made her way to the offices in the East Wing. This was where the base's senior staff worked, including Commander James Mitchell, a man whose reputation for attention to detail was legendary throughout the installation. Commander Mitchell had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had a Bronze Star and Purple Heart to show for his dedication to his country and his soldiers. Maria had been cleaning his office for 3 years, and in all that time, Commander Mitchell had never been there during her shifts. He arrived early and left late, but somehow their schedules never overlapped. She knew him only through the personal items in his office, the photographs of his deployment, the letters from soldiers he had served with, the small American flag that had flown over a forward operating base in Kandahar. What she didn't know was that Commander Mitchell had been keeping track of her too, though not in the way she might have expected. As the base's security officer, part of his job involved maintaining awareness of everyone who worked on the installation, from the highest-ranking officers to the civilian contractors and support staff. Over the past few months, Mitchell had begun to notice small discrepancies in the security reports. Nothing major, nothing that raised red flags with the automated systems, but tiny inconsistencies that suggested someone with advanced knowledge was moving through the facility. Documents that were organized more efficiently than they should have been. Equipment that was positioned in ways that actually improved security protocols. Conference rooms that were cleaned so thoroughly that even dust particles were arranged, in ways that would make it obvious. If anyone had disturbed the space, these weren't the actions of someone trying to steal information or compromise security. If anything, they were the actions of someone who understood security protocols better than most of the junior officers on base. Someone who was actually improving their operational security without authorization, without recognition, and seemingly without anyone noticing. Mitchell had begun arriving earlier and staying later, trying to catch a glimpse of who was responsible for these subtle improvements. His money was on one of the night shift security guards, maybe a former military police officer who was applying old training to civilian work. He never suspected the cleaning lady who had been invisible in his building for 3 years as Maria finished her work in the commander's office. She paused for just a moment at his desk. There, partially hidden under a stack of routine paperwork, was a mission brief that made her blood run cold. The operation it described was eerily similar to one she had planned and executed 15 years ago in Eastern Europe. But the current intelligence was flawed. Dangerously flawed. For a moment, Maria forgot where she was, forgot who she was supposed to be. Her mind automatically began analyzing the strategic errors in the brief, identifying the intelligence gaps that could get soldiers killed. Her hand moved toward the papers before she caught herself. She was just a cleaning lady now. Whatever Maria Santos, the intelligence operative, might have done, this Maria Santos emptied trash cans and mopped floors. She had no clearance, no authority, no right to even be looking at these documents, let alone correcting them. But as she pushed her cart toward the next office, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed invisible life was about to become very visible indeed. Commander Mitchell arrived at his office that Tuesday morning earlier than usual, a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a secure phone in the other. He had been on a conference call with Pentagon officials since 5 a.m., discussing intelligence reports from overseas operations. The conversation had been frustrating, filled with gaps in information that reminded him why he preferred field work to desk assignments. As he pushed open his office door, Mitchell stopped mid-sentence in his phone conversation. Something was different. His desk, which he had left in its usual organized chaos the night before, was now arranged with military precision. The mission brief he had been reviewing was no longer buried under routine paperwork, but positioned prominently in the center of his desk, with what appeared to be handwritten notes in the margins. "Sir, I'm going to have to call you back," Mitchell said into the phone, ending the call without waiting for a response. He approached his desk cautiously, his training telling him to treat any unauthorized access to classified materials as a potential security breach. The handwriting was small and precise, written in pencil so light it was barely visible, but as Mitchell read the notes, his confusion grew. These weren't the markings of someone trying to steal information. These were corrections, strategic improvements, intelligence assessments that were more accurate than what his own analysts had provided. Whoever had written these notes understood not just military tactics, but the specific regional politics of the area in question. They had identified flaws in the operational timeline, suggested alternative extraction routes, and even provided updated information about local tribal leaders that wasn't in any of the official intelligence reports. Mitchell's first instinct was to call base security, but something held him back. The person who had made these notes clearly had extensive knowledge of military operations, but they had also taken great care to make the markings nearly invisible. If someone wanted to compromise this mission, there were far more effective ways to do it than leaving helpful suggestions on his desk. He looked around his office more carefully, noticing other small changes. His bookshelf, which had always been functional but disorganized, was now arranged so that frequently referenced manuals were within easy reach. The photographs on his wall had been cleaned and straightened, but more than that, they had been positioned to eliminate glare from the window, making them easier to view during video conferences. Someone had been in his office. Someone who understood not just cleaning but operational efficiency. Someone who had been observing his work patterns and quietly making improvements. Mitchell sat down at his desk and opened his computer, pulling up the base personnel files. He began systematically reviewing the backgrounds of everyone with access to his office. The list was shorter than he expected. His aide, 2 junior officers who occasionally delivered reports, and the cleaning staff. 3 hours later, Mitchell had eliminated everyone except the cleaning crew. The day shift was handled by a company that employed mostly local residents, background checked but not to the level required for someone with this kind of operational knowledge. The night shift was different, though. There was only one person assigned to the administrative wing during the overnight hours, Maria Santos. Her employment file was surprisingly thin. 3 years at Barrett installation, excellent performance reviews, no disciplinary actions. Before that, she had worked for a cleaning company in California with references that all checked out. Before that, nothing. It was as if Maria Santos had materialized out of thin air at age 49, with no history, no family, no life before she started pushing a mop cart through military facilities. Mitchell had seen enough intelligence files to recognize a constructed identity when he saw one. The question was whether Maria Santos was hiding from something dangerous or hiding something dangerous. That afternoon, he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of leaving at his usual time, Mitchell decided to work late, giving himself a chance to observe the mysterious cleaning lady who had been improving his operational security without permission. At 8 p.m., the administrative wing was nearly empty. Most of the day shift had gone home, leaving only the skeleton crew that maintained security and essential functions through the night. Mitchell dimmed the lights in his office and positioned himself where he could see the corridor through his partially open door. At exactly 8:15, he heard the soft squeak of wheels on linoleum. Maria Santos appeared in the hallway, pushing her cart with the same methodical precision she had shown every day for 3 years. But tonight, Mitchell was watching with the trained eye of someone who had spent decades identifying threats and assets in hostile territory. The woman pushing that cart moved like a professional. Her eyes constantly scanned the environment, cataloging exits and potential threats. She positioned her cart not just for convenience, but to provide cover and quick access to the stairwell. When she paused to unlock a door, she did so while maintaining situational awareness of the entire corridor. These weren't the movements of someone who cleaned buildings for a living. These were the movements of someone who had been trained to operate in dangerous environments, someone who had learned to survive by staying alert and staying invisible. Mitchell watched as Maria entered the office across from his. Through the window, he could see her working, but again, there was something different about the way she moved. She cleaned efficiently, but she also organized, making small improvements that went far beyond her job description. When she found documents left on desks, she didn't just dust around them. She arranged them in ways that would be more secure and accessible. More tellingly, as she worked, her eyes kept returning to a map on the wall that showed current deployment locations for several units. She studied it with the intensity of someone who understood what those positions meant, someone who was analyzing strategic implications rather than just dusting the glass. When Maria moved to his office, Mitchell held his breath. He watched through the crack in his door as she entered, moving with the same careful efficiency she always showed. But tonight he saw something he had missed before. Before she began cleaning, she paused at his desk, her eyes scanning the documents there with practiced speed. It lasted only seconds, but Mitchell recognized what he was seeing. Maria Santos was reading classified documents, and from her expression, she understood every word. As she began to clean, Mitchell noticed something else. Maria's movements around his office weren't random. She was conducting a security sweep, checking for surveillance devices or anything that seemed out of place. It was subtle, built into her cleaning routine, but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. When she finished and moved on to the next office, Mitchell waited 5 minutes before approaching his desk. There, penciled so lightly he had to use a magnifying glass to read them, were more notes on the mission brief. This time, the suggestions included tactical recommendations that could only have come from someone with extensive field experience. But there was something else. Hidden among the operational notes was a single word that made Mitchell's heart race. Nightshade. Nightshade had been a classified operation conducted 15 years ago in Eastern Europe. It had been so sensitive that fewer than 20 people in the entire military had known about it, and most of those were now dead or retired. The operation had been successful, but it had never appeared in any official records. It was the kind of mission that officially never happened. The only people who would know that code name were people who had been directly involved in planning or executing the operation. And according to the classified after-action reports that Mitchell had access to, the tactical officer who had planned Nightshade had been a woman, a deep-cover operative whose real identity had been classified above his clearance level. Mitchell stared at the barely visible word on his mission brief and felt the pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place. Maria Santos wasn't just someone with military training. She was someone whose military training had been at the very highest levels of classified operations. The woman who had been cleaning his office for 3 years wasn't hiding from her past. She was hiding her past because it was so classified that admitting to it could be considered treason. As Mitchell sat in his office, surrounded by the subtle improvements that Maria had been making for 3 years, he realized he was facing a decision that would define not just his career, but potentially the security of ongoing military operations. He had either discovered a security threat that had been operating under their noses for 3 years, or he had found an asset so valuable that her exposure could compromise national security. Either way, Maria Santos was about to discover that being invisible was no longer an option. Maria knew something had changed the moment she walked into the administrative wing the next morning. The usual quiet tension of a military facility had shifted into something sharper, more focused. Security guards who normally nodded politely at her now watched with professional interest. The young Lieutenant Chen, who always greeted her warmly, seemed nervous as she hurried past with barely a glance. But it was the man sitting in the corridor outside Commander Mitchell's office who confirmed Maria's worst fears. Agent David Harrison wore a civilian suit, but Maria recognized the particular stillness of a federal agent. She had worked with enough of them during her active years to know the type. Harrison looked up as she approached with her cleaning cart, and their eyes met for just a moment. In that brief exchange, Maria saw recognition and knew that her carefully constructed life was about to crumble. "Mrs. Santos," Harrison said, standing as she approached. "I'm Agent Harrison, Department of Defense. I wonder if we might have a conversation." Maria's heart pounded, but her expression remained neutral. 3 years of practice at being invisible had taught her to control her reactions. "I am working now," she said, letting her accent thicken slightly, playing the role of a woman whose English was limited. "I cannot stop to talk." "I think you'll want to make an exception," Harrison replied quietly. "We know about Prague." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Prague was 15 years in the past, classified so deeply that even mentioning it in an unsecured location was a federal crime. Whatever had triggered this investigation, it was serious enough to risk exposing operations that were supposed to remain buried forever. Commander Mitchell appeared in his office doorway, and Maria saw something in his expression that surprised her. Where she expected suspicion or anger, she found what looked almost like concern. "Mrs. Santos, would you please join us? We'd like to discuss some security matters with you." Maria looked between the two men, calculating odds and options with the same analytical mind that had once planned missions across 3 continents. She could run, but where would she go? She could deny everything, but the mention of Prague meant they already knew more than they were letting on. Her only real choice was to find out exactly how much they knew and whether there was any way to salvage the life she had built. "See," she said quietly, parking her cart against the wall. "I will come." Mitchell's office felt smaller with 3 people in it, especially when one of those people carried the weight of secrets that could reshape military history. Harrison closed the door and activated a small device that would prevent electronic surveillance, a precaution that told Maria this conversation was about to venture into territory that officially didn't exist. "Let's start with the truth," Harrison said, pulling out a file that looked disturbingly thick. "Your name isn't Maria Santos, is it?" For a long moment, Maria said nothing. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry 3 years of careful deception, she straightened her shoulders and let the submissive posture of a cleaning lady fall away. When she spoke again, her voice was clear and unaccented. "My name is Colonel Elena Martinez, United States Army Intelligence, retired. Though I suspect you already know that." The transformation was startling. The tired cleaning woman disappeared, replaced by someone who clearly had decades of command experience. Mitchell found himself instinctively straightening to attention before catching himself. Harrison nodded, consulting his file. Elena Martinez, one of the most decorated intelligence officers in Army history. 3 decades of service, most of it in deep cover operations. Silver Star, Distinguished Service Medal, and about a dozen commendations that are still classified. Officially retired 5 years ago. Unofficially disappeared 4 years ago after your identity was compromised during Operation Sandstorm. Elena, no longer bothering with the Maria Santos persona, met Harrison's gaze steadily. Sandstorm went sideways when someone in Washington leaked intelligence to foreign nationals. 3 of my assets were killed, and my cover was blown to the point where staying in official channels meant death. So yes, I disappeared, and ended up here, cleaning toilets at a military installation in Texas, Mitchell said, and Elena heard something in his voice that wasn't quite accusation. I needed to be invisible, Elena replied. I also needed to be somewhere I could keep tabs on potential security threats. Working in a place like this, seeing the daily operations, reading the intelligence reports that people carelessly leave on their desks, it allowed me to stay connected to the work that mattered while staying off the radar of whoever wanted me dead. Harrison leaned forward. And in the process, you've been conducting unauthorized intelligence analysis, improving security protocols, and accessing classified information without clearance. Do you understand that technically, you've been committing espionage against your own country for 3 years? Elena's laugh was bitter. I've been protecting this country for 3 years. Do you want to know how many security vulnerabilities I've quietly fixed in this building? How many operational plans I've improved without anyone knowing? How many potential threats I've identified and reported through anonymous channels? The Prague reference in Commander Mitchell's mission brief, Harrison continued. You recognized operational patterns from Nightshade, didn't you? Elena looked sharply at Mitchell. You found my notes, Mitchell nodded. Your suggestions were more accurate than what our official analysts provided. But when you referenced Nightshade, I knew we weren't dealing with an ordinary cleaning lady. The current operation is a mistake, Elena said bluntly. The intelligence is flawed, the timeline is wrong, and the extraction plan will get people killed. I couldn't just stand by and watch soldiers die because some analyst in Washington doesn't understand regional politics. Harrison and Mitchell exchanged glances. The mission in question was scheduled to begin in 2 weeks, and Elena's assessment aligned with concerns that had been raised through other channels. Why should we trust you? Harrison asked. For all we know, you've been compromised, turned by foreign intelligence, feeding them information for years. Elena stood up, and both men tensed slightly. But instead of moving toward the door, she walked to Mitchell's bookshelf and pulled out a manual on counter-terrorism operations. From between the pages, she extracted a small flash drive. 3 years of intelligence, she said, placing it on Mitchell's desk. Every security vulnerability I've identified, every threat assessment I've conducted, every operational improvement I've recommended. Cross-reference it with any intelligence reports from this period, and you'll see that Elena Martinez has been working for American interests every single day she's been Maria Santos. Mitchell picked up the drive, turning it over in his hands. Why keep records? If you were trying to stay hidden, documentation was a risk. Because I knew this day would come eventually, Elena replied. Someone would notice the improvements, ask questions, dig into backgrounds. I kept records because I knew I'd need to prove my loyalty when my identity was inevitably discovered. Harrison was already on his phone, presumably arranging for the drive to be analyzed. When he hung up, he looked at Elena with a mixture of respect and frustration. Assuming this all checks out, we still have a problem. Elena Martinez is officially dead. Her service record has been classified to the point where acknowledging her existence could compromise ongoing operations. And Maria Santos has been accessing classified information without authorization for 3 years. Elena sat back down, and for a moment she looked tired again, like the cleaning lady she had been pretending to be. I know. I've known since the day I took this job that I was probably trading one kind of death for another. But people are alive today because of the work I've done here. Soldiers who came home safely because I caught intelligence errors. Attacks that were prevented because I identified threats early. If that means I go to prison or worse, then that's the price I pay for keeping faith with my oath. Mitchell found himself impressed despite the circumstances. Your oath? To support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, Elena recited. That oath didn't end when I became officially dead. It didn't end when I put on a janitor's uniform. Every day for 3 years I've honored that oath the only way I could. The room fell silent as the three of them contemplated the implications. Elena had committed multiple federal crimes but in service of national security. She had violated protocol but had potentially saved lives. She was legally a ghost but had been protecting the very people who now had to decide her fate. Harrison's phone rang, interrupting the silence. After a brief conversation, he hung up and looked at Elena with an expression that was impossible to read. The preliminary analysis of your intelligence is complete, he said. You were right about the Prague operation. You've also been right about 17 other security assessments over the past 3 years. The question now is what we do about it. Elena straightened her shoulders again. That's not my decision to make anymore. I've been Maria Santos for as long as I can. Elena Martinez is ready to face whatever comes next. But as she spoke, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her story was far from over. The look in Mitchell's eyes suggested he was thinking the same thing. The secure conference room in the basement of Building 7 had never felt smaller. Elena sat across from a panel of officials who had flown in from Washington overnight. 2 Pentagon intelligence officers, a representative from the CIA, and someone from Homeland Security whose exact title remained classified. Agent Harrison sat to her left, while Commander Mitchell occupied a chair by the door. His presence requested because he had been the one to discover her identity. General Patricia Hawkins, a woman Elena had worked with during the early days of Operation Enduring Freedom, led the questioning. The years had added gray to Hawkins' hair and lines around her eyes, but her voice carried the same authority that Elena remembered from battlefield briefings 2 decades earlier. Colonel Martinez, General Hawkins began, using Elena's real rank for the first time in 3 years. We need to understand the scope of what you've been doing here. Your intelligence reports have been remarkably accurate, but they've also revealed knowledge that extends far beyond what someone in your position should have access to. Elena had prepared for this question. General, in 3 years of cleaning this facility, I've observed operational patterns, read discarded documents, overheard conversations. I've also maintained contacts within the intelligence community who trust Elena Martinez even if they can't officially acknowledge her existence. The CIA representative, a thin man with sharp eyes named Collins, leaned forward. Those contacts will need names. With respect, sir, you'll get nothing that compromises the safety of people who've been helping me serve our country, Elena replied firmly. Some of these individuals are still in deep cover operations. Exposing them would cost lives. General Hawkins raised a hand to silence Collins before he could respond. Let's focus on the immediate situation. The Prague operation you've been analyzing. Walk us through your assessment. Elena stood and moved to the whiteboard at the front of the room. For the next 20 minutes, she outlined the flaws in the current intelligence, drew alternative strategic approaches, and explained why the planned timeline would likely result in casualties. As she spoke, Elena could see recognition in the faces around the table. These weren't the observations of a cleaning lady who had stumbled across classified information. These were the insights of someone with decades of operational experience and an analytical mind that could process complex intelligence scenarios. When she finished, the room was quiet for several moments. Finally, General Hawkins spoke. Your assessment aligns with concerns raised by our field commanders, but your suggested modifications are more comprehensive than anything our current analysts have proposed. The question is whether we can trust intelligence from someone who has been operating without authorization for 3 years. The Homeland Security representative, a woman named Director Sarah Chen, who Elena noticed bore a resemblance to Lieutenant Chen, consulted her tablet. Colonel Martinez, during your official career, you had a spotless record. No disciplinary actions, no security violations, no indications of disloyalty. But that was before Sandstorm compromised your identity. How do we know you haven't been turned? Elena had expected this question too. Director Chen, if I had been turned, why would I be improving American military operations? Why would I be identifying security vulnerabilities and reporting threats? A compromised agent would be extracting intelligence and sabotaging operations, not strengthening them. Collins spoke up again. Unless this is a long-term play. Build trust over 3 years, then use that trust to insert false intelligence at a critical moment. Then analyze the intelligence I've provided. Elena shot back. Cross-reference every assessment, every threat identification, every operational suggestion. If you find a single instance where following my analysis would have harmed American interests or personnel, I'll confess to whatever charges you want to bring. Commander Mitchell, who had been silent throughout most of the questioning, finally spoke. I've been reviewing Colonel Martinez's work for the past 48 hours. In 3 years, she's identified 12 security vulnerabilities that our official assessments missed. She's improved operational security protocols in ways that have measurably enhanced the safety of personnel on this base. And she's done all of this while maintaining a cover identity so complete that none of us suspected her true background. General Hawkins turned to Mitchell. Commander, what's your professional assessment? Mitchell looked directly at Elena as he answered. General, if I had 100 officers with Colonel Martinez's skills and dedication, we could revolutionize military intelligence operations. Her work here represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking and attention to detail that our forces need. The panel exchanged glances, and Elena sensed the dynamic in the room shifting. Agent Harrison pulled out his phone and stepped into the corner for a whispered conversation. When he returned, his expression was grim. We have a more immediate problem, Harrison announced. Intelligence indicates that Elena Martinez's location may have been compromised. The same foreign nationals who forced her to disappear 4 years ago have been making inquiries about a woman, matching her description working at military installations in the southwestern United States. Elena felt the familiar chill of being hunted. How long do I have? Unknown. Could be days, could be weeks. But staying here as Maria Santos is no longer safe, and returning to your official identity could put you in even greater danger. General Hawkins stood, pacing to the window that looked out onto the base's main courtyard. Colonel Martinez, I'm going to be direct. We need your expertise, particularly for the Prague operation, and several others that are based on similar intelligence patterns. But we can't officially reinstate you without exposing operations that are still classified above congressional oversight level. Elena understood the implications immediately. You want me to continue working unofficially? We want to offer you a different kind of service, General Hawkins replied. A small team, operating with minimal oversight, handling intelligence analysis for our most sensitive operations. You would have access to the information you need to do your job properly, but you would remain officially deceased. Collins objected immediately. General, the security risks of operating an unofficial intelligence unit are outweighed by the security benefits of having someone with Colonel Martinez's capabilities working for us instead of remaining unmonitored. Hawkins cut him off. We've seen what she can accomplish working alone with limited access to information. Imagine what she could do with proper support. Elena considered the offer carefully. It would mean continuing to live in the shadows, never being able to reclaim her real identity or the recognition she had earned through 3 decades of service. But it would also mean being able to do the work she had trained her entire adult life to do, protecting American interests and personnel through intelligence and strategic planning. What about the Prague operation? Elena asked. If you accept our proposal, your first assignment would be to provide a complete tactical assessment and alternative operational plan, General Hawkins replied. Your analysis would carry significant weight in determining whether the operation proceeds as planned or is modified based on your recommendations. Elena looked around the room at the faces of people who were offering her a chance to continue serving her country, albeit in a way that would keep her permanently in the shadows. She thought about the soldiers who might die if the Prague operation proceeded with flawed intelligence, about the security threats she had identified over the past 3 years, about the oath she had taken as a young officer to protect and defend the Constitution. I have conditions, Elena said finally. General Hawkins raised an eyebrow. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. With respect, General, you need what I can provide more than I need official recognition, Elena replied. My conditions are simple. First, I work with a small team of people I trust, including Commander Mitchell if he's willing. Second, I have complete access to intelligence relevant to my assignments. Third, if my analysis indicates an operation should be canceled or modified, that recommendation carries the same weight as an assessment from your official intelligence officers. The panel conferred in whispered conversation for several minutes. Finally, General Hawkins turned back to Elena. Accepted, with the understanding that you'll be operating under a new identity with a manufactured background that can withstand scrutiny. Maria Santos will disappear as completely as Elena Martinez did. Elena nodded slowly. And if the people hunting me find this new identity? Harrison answered this time. Then we'll deal with that threat permanently. You're too valuable an asset to lose to old enemies. As the meeting concluded and arrangements were made for Elena's transition to whatever came next, she couldn't help but think about the irony of her situation. She had spent 3 years trying to remain invisible, only to discover that her work had made her more visible than ever to the people who mattered. The woman who had cleaned floors and emptied trash cans was about to become one of the most important intelligence analysts in the United States military. But she would still be a ghost, still be someone who officially didn't exist. Some things, Elena reflected, never really changed. 6 weeks later, Dr. Catherine Wells adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and reviewed the intelligence report spread across her desk in a nondescript office building 30 miles from Barrett installation. To anyone observing, she appeared to be exactly what her credentials suggested: a civilian contractor specializing in regional political analysis for Department of Defense operations. Her background check revealed a doctorate in international relations from Georgetown, 15 years of consulting work for various government agencies, and a security clearance appropriate for her level of access. What the background check didn't reveal was that Dr. Catherine Wells was the latest identity constructed for the woman who had once been Colonel Elena Martinez and later Maria Santos. The transformation had been comprehensive, complete with manufactured academic records, published papers in obscure political science journals, and even a credit history dating back 20 years. But underneath the carefully crafted persona, Elena retained all the skills and instincts that had made her one of the military's most effective intelligence officers. The difference now was that she had the resources and authority to do her job properly. Commander Mitchell had accepted the transfer to head the new intelligence unit, officially designated as the Regional Analysis Task Force. The unit operated with minimal bureaucratic oversight, reporting directly to General Hawkins and a select group of senior officials who understood the sensitive nature of their work. Their mandate was simple: provide accurate intelligence analysis for operations that couldn't afford mistakes. The Prague operation had been their first major success. Elena's revised tactical plan had reduced the mission timeline from 6 weeks to 10 days, identified 3 extraction routes that official intelligence had missed, and provided updated information about local power structures that proved crucial to the operation's success. When the mission concluded without casualties and achieved all primary objectives, Elena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Soldiers had come home safely because she had done her job well. Now she was working on something even more complex. Intelligence reports from multiple sources suggested a coordinated terrorist plot, targeting military installations across 3 countries. The pattern was subtle, buried in seemingly unrelated incidents and communications, but Elena's analytical mind had begun to see connections that others missed. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, who had been recruited to the unit after demonstrating exceptional analytical skills, knocked on Elena's office door. The young officer had been one of the few people at Barrett who had treated Maria Santos with genuine respect, and Elena had specifically requested her for the team. Dr. Wells, "We've received the latest intercepts from NSA," Lieutenant Chen said, entering with a secured tablet. "The communication patterns you identified are becoming more pronounced." Elena reviewed the data, her eyes scanning encrypted messages that had been decoded but not yet analyzed. To most observers, the communications appeared to be routine business transactions and personal messages between legitimate contacts. But Elena saw something else: a timing pattern that corresponded to shift changes at military facilities, coded references to equipment and personnel numbers, and geographic markers that indicated detailed surveillance of American installations. "They're not just planning attacks," Elena said quietly. "They're planning simultaneous attacks, coordinated to maximize impact and minimize response time. Look at these timestamps. Lieutenant Chen leaned over Elena's shoulder, studying the data. The messages are timed to arrive during shift changes at each targeted facility. They know our security protocols. Elena felt the familiar chill that came with recognizing a serious threat. It's worse than that. These communication patterns suggest they have inside information about security procedures at multiple installations. We're not just dealing with external surveillance. We're dealing with infiltration. Commander Mitchell entered the office without knocking, a privilege that came with their shared history and mutual trust. What do we have? Elena turned her computer screen so he could see the analysis she had been preparing. A coordinated attack plan targeting 7 military installations across the United States and 2 allied facilities overseas. The attackers have detailed knowledge of security protocols, shift patterns, and facility layouts. Based on the sophistication of the intelligence they're working with, I estimate they have assets inside at least 3 of the targeted installations. Mitchell studied the data for several minutes, his expression growing more serious as he processed the implications. Timeline? Based on the accelerating communication patterns, I'd say we have 72 hours, maybe less, Elena replied. They're moving into final preparation phase. Have you identified the specific facilities? Mitchell asked. Elena highlighted several locations on a digital map. Barrett installation is one of them. Naval Air Station Pensacola, Fort Carson, and 4 others. The pattern suggests they're targeting installations with significant intelligence operations or advanced weapons systems. Lieutenant Chen looked up from her tablet. Dr. Wells, there's something else. I've been cross-referencing personnel files at the targeted installations, looking for connections or anomalies. I found something disturbing. She connected her tablet to the main display, showing a series of personnel photographs and data files. Each of the targeted installations has recently hired civilian contractors or support staff with similar background profiles. Different names, different companies, but the same pattern of employment history and security clearances. Elena studied the faces on the screen, her analytical mind automatically cataloging details and looking for connections. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold. One of the faces was familiar, not because she recognized the person, but because she recognized the type of surgical alterations that had been made to change the person's appearance. Mitchell, we need to contact General Hawkins immediately, Elena said, reaching for the secure phone. This isn't just a terrorist plot. This is a sophisticated intelligence operation, and based on the surgical work I'm seeing in these photographs, I suspect we're dealing with foreign military operatives, not civilian terrorists. As Elena made the call, she couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. 3 years ago, she had been a ghost hiding in plain sight at a military installation, using her cover as a cleaning lady to conduct unauthorized intelligence work. Now she was discovering that others had been doing the same thing, but with far more sinister intentions. The difference was that Elena had been trying to protect American lives and interests, while these operatives were planning to destroy them. Within an hour, Elena's small office had been transformed into a crisis command center. General Hawkins participated via secure video link from the Pentagon, while representatives from FBI counterterrorism and NSA joined by encrypted communication. The room buzzed with activity as Elena's analysis was verified and expanded upon by additional intelligence resources. The sophistication of this operation is unprecedented, General Hawkins said from the screen. Dr. Wells, your assessment suggests we're dealing with state-sponsored operatives rather than terrorist cells. Do you have any indication of which nation might be behind this? Elena had been expecting this question and had spent the past hour reviewing everything she knew about foreign intelligence operations and surgical alteration techniques. General, based on the surgical work and the coordination patterns, I believe we're looking at Russian military intelligence. The GRU has been developing long-term infiltration strategies for the past decade, and this operation has all the hallmarks of their methodology. Agent Harrison, who had been coordinating with federal law enforcement, spoke up from the back of the room. If Dr. Wells is correct, then we're not just dealing with an imminent attack. We're dealing with assets that have been in place for months or possibly years, gathering intelligence and preparing for this operation. Elena stood at the front of the room, looking at the faces of people who were depending on her analysis to prevent what could be the most devastating attack on military installations in American history. She thought about the soldiers who went to work every day at these facilities, trusting that their security protocols would keep them safe. She thought about Lieutenant Chen and Commander Mitchell and all the other people who had become part of her new life. "We can stop this," Elena said with quiet confidence. "But we need to move quickly, and we need to be prepared for the possibility that when we begin arresting these operatives, others may accelerate their timeline and launch immediate attacks." General Hawkins leaned forward on the screen. "Dr. Wells, I'm authorizing you to take operational command of this response. You have full access to whatever resources you need, and your tactical recommendations will be implemented immediately." Elena felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders, a familiar sensation that she had missed more than she realized during her years of invisibility. "Thank you, General. I won't let you down." As the meeting concluded and teams began deploying to the targeted installations, Elena realized that her journey from decorated colonel to invisible cleaning lady to ghost analyst had led her to this moment. Everything she had learned, every skill she had developed, every sacrifice she had made, had prepared her for this crisis. The woman who had once cleaned floors at Barrett installation was about to orchestrate one of the most complex counterintelligence operations in recent military history. And this time, she wouldn't be working alone. The operation unfolded with precision that would have made Elena's old training instructors proud. At exactly 0300 hours, coordinated teams moved simultaneously against the infiltrated operatives at all 7 American installations. Elena watched from the command center as real-time updates flowed in from each location, her analysis having provided the intelligence that made the operation possible. Barrett installation was the first to report success. The 2 operatives who had been working as maintenance staff were taken into custody without incident, along with a cache of explosives and sophisticated surveillance equipment hidden in their quarters. Fort Carson followed with 3 arrests, then Naval Air Station Pensacola with 2 more. But it was the intelligence recovered from the operatives that provided the biggest shock. Among the documents was a detailed file on Elena Martinez, complete with photographs from her active service years and information about her supposed death during Operation Sandstorm. The Foreign Intelligence Service had not only known she was alive, but had been actively searching for her. Commander Mitchell, monitoring communications from the command center, looked up from his console with concern. "Catherine, they weren't just planning attacks on installations. They were looking for you specifically. Barrett wasn't chosen randomly. They knew Elena Martinez was there." Elena studied the intelligence reports, her mind processing the implications. "They wanted to eliminate me before launching their attacks. They knew that Elena Martinez was the one analyst who might be able to identify their operational patterns. Lieutenant Chen, who had been coordinating with NSA on communication intercepts, turned from her station with urgent news. Dr. Wells, we're intercepting increased chatter from overseas. It looks like the capture of their operatives has triggered a contingency plan. There are indications of an immediate response being organized." Elena had anticipated this possibility. When a sophisticated intelligence operation was compromised, the sponsoring nation often had backup plans designed to salvage what they could from the situation. "Show me the intercepts." The communications were coded, but Elena recognized the urgency patterns. Someone was organizing a direct action against the intelligence team that had exposed the plot. More specifically, they were organizing a direct action against her. General Hawkins appeared on the secure video link, her expression grave. "Dr. Wells, intelligence indicates a foreign assassination team has been activated with your location as their primary target. We're implementing immediate protective protocols." Elena shook her head. "General, running and hiding won't solve this problem. As long as they see me as a threat, they'll keep coming. We need to end this permanently." Agent Harrison, who had arrived at the command center an hour earlier, spoke up from across the room. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we use their obsession with eliminating me to our advantage," Elena replied, moving to the tactical display. "They want Elena Martinez dead badly enough to risk exposing additional assets. We give them what they think they want, and we capture the entire network." Commander Mitchell immediately understood where she was going. "You want to use yourself as bait." "I want to use Dr. Catherine Wells as bait," Elena corrected. "As far as they know, Elena Martinez is still Maria Santos, still cleaning floors at Barrett installation. They don't know about the new identity. If we can make them believe they've found Elena Martinez while actually setting a trap for them as Catherine Wells, we can roll up their entire assassination network. The plan that Elena outlined over the next 2 hours was both elegant and dangerous. Using intelligence gathered from the captured operatives, they would feed false information suggesting that Elena Martinez was still at Barrett installation, working under minimal protection. Meanwhile, Dr. Catherine Wells would appear to be conducting routine intelligence analysis at her office, apparently unaware that her location had been compromised. The foreign assassination team would have 2 apparent targets, but both would actually be carefully prepared traps with Elena playing both roles at different times, supported by elite military units positioned for rapid response. Lieutenant Chen raised an objection that others were thinking. "Dr. Wells, this plan requires you to personally confront trained assassins. Even with backup, the risk is enormous." Elena smiled, and for a moment her expression carried all the confidence and determination that had made her legendary during her active service years. "Lieutenant, I've been preparing for this confrontation for 4 years, ever since they first tried to kill me. The only difference is that now I'm choosing the time and place." General Hawkins studied the tactical plan on her screen for several minutes before speaking. "Dr. Wells, this operation goes far beyond your current authorization level. You're proposing to engage in active combat operations against foreign intelligence operatives on American soil." "General, I'm proposing to finish what they started," Elena replied. "These people have been hunting me for 4 years, and now they've escalated to planning attacks on American military installations. This ends now, one way or another." The operation was approved with the understanding that Elena was accepting personal risk that went far beyond normal intelligence work. But as she prepared for what might be the final confrontation with the people who had forced her into hiding, Elena felt a sense of completion that had been missing from her life for years. 3 days later, Elena stood in the familiar corridors of Barrett installation, wearing the uniform of a cleaning lady once again. This time, however, the uniform concealed sophisticated body armor and communication equipment, and she carried weapons that Maria Santos never would have been authorized to possess. The assassination team arrived exactly when Elena's intelligence analysis had predicted they would, during the shift change that provided optimal access to the administrative building. But instead of finding a vulnerable target, they encountered Elena Martinez at full operational capability, supported by elite military units who had been waiting in concealment. The confrontation lasted less than 10 minutes. When it was over, the foreign assassination network had been completely dismantled, their leadership either captured or eliminated. More importantly, the intelligence recovered from the operation revealed the full scope of the infiltration program, allowing American counterintelligence to identify and neutralize dozens of additional foreign assets. Elena walked through the corridors of Barrett installation one final time, passing the offices she had cleaned for 3 years and thinking about the strange journey that had brought her full circle. She paused outside Commander Mitchell's office, remembering the morning when he had first noticed the improvements she had been making to his operational security. Lieutenant Chen, now permanently assigned to Elena's intelligence unit, joined her in the hallway. "So what happens now, Dr. Wells?" Elena considered the question. Elena Martinez was still officially dead and would remain so for security reasons. Maria Santos had disappeared completely, her employment records sealed and classified. Dr. Catherine Wells would continue her work with the intelligence unit, operating in the shadows to protect American interests. "Now we do what we've always done," Elena replied. "We serve our country, protect our people, and stay ready for whatever threat comes next. The only difference is that now we do it with proper resources and official support." As they walked toward the exit, Elena reflected on the lessons she had learned during her years of invisibility. She had discovered that heroism didn't require recognition, that duty could be fulfilled without acknowledgement, and that the most important work was often done by people whose names would never appear in history books. She had spent 3 years learning to be invisible, only to discover that the best way to protect the things you care about is sometimes to step out of the shadows and stand in the light. Elena Martinez had been a decorated colonel, Maria Santos had been a dedicated cleaning lady, and Dr. Catherine Wells was a skilled intelligence analyst. But underneath all the identities and cover stories, she was the same person she had always been. A soldier who had sworn an oath to protect and defend her country, and who would honor that oath no matter what name she carried or what uniform she wore. The woman who had once cleaned floors in obscurity now walked out of Barrett installation knowing that her Real work was just beginning. But this time, she wouldn't be working alone and she wouldn't be invisible. Some ghosts, Elena thought as she stepped into the Texas sunshine, were meant to come back to life,